The usual wife betrayal. My name is Edward Maxwell. I am a composer and a very good one, if I may say so. There is no path to riches here, though I do manage to make a living at it. Still, it annoys me how much more money these illiterate pop musicians make than an innovator like me. If you're interested, I'll tell you more about that. But first, let me tell you about my wife. Joanna is 3 years younger than me and the daughter of one of my professors who taught music in graduate school. Professor Berger showed more interest in me than usual and invited me to his home for dinner. It was there that I met Joan, who had just graduated from college. I think this was my teacher's plan. Although she couldn't be called beautiful, there was something about her that attracted me, and apparently the feeling was mutual. We started dating and quickly became exclusive. Neither of us were virgins when we met, but I think it's safe to say that it was together that we learned a lot. She really liked having sex. What we may have lacked in imagination, we made up for in regularity. And then the inevitable happened in the second year of our relationship. Although we were probably going to get married anyway, the conception of a daughter pushed the timeline. By then, I had finished grad school and was looking for a high-paying job. While blockbuster games often feature music by famous authors, there are many games that are not such commercial giants. For example, online games created on a free-to-play platform. Despite the fact that they bring not much money, their developers can earn a decent and stable life. And these games need music too. That's where I was able to prove myself. Experienced composers often work on movie soundtracks. There's a lot of gold in these mountains, but there's also a lot of competition. Instead of fighting my way through, I found a full-time job creating music for these free games. The trick is that casual game players, note that I say game players, not gamers, prefer the familiar. And so the path to steady work in my field is being able to create music that sounds like people already know it. It's important not to violate anyone's copyright in doing so. It takes skill to hint at a well-known theme in an original composition. With my extensive musical knowledge, I was able to succeed. In fact, it was enough that Joanna didn't need to work and could instead stay home with Valerie and her younger brother, Alex. It also didn't bother me at all that since my income was from writing music, I could do my work from home, except for the occasional business meeting out of town. So, we were happily married with young children in a decent and stable home. Sure, we may have been a bit withdrawn, but we liked it that way. Joan and I were not only alike as 2 peas in a pod, but the 4 of us were a quartet in one bottle. I met Jerry Stone at an afternoon meeting at my father-in-law's house. Joanna stayed home with the kids who were out of school for Christmas vacation. Jerry was a brilliant artist, but that art form is somewhat lost these days. He and I got to talking about how computer technology has affected real work, ironically because that's where my bread was buttered. Nevertheless, we bonded, despite our dissatisfaction that computers had made it easier for those without knowledge or talent to create both visual and musical art. So we became fast friends. Jerry was an interesting mix of shy and manic, and I found comfort in our mutual reticence while simultaneously enjoying the enthusiasm he was capable of showing for just about anything, especially in our different areas of creativity. I was fascinated by what he could do with a blank canvas, just as he marveled at the way one could hear what I was depicting on the music sheet. Although he had no ambition in my field, I tried my hand at creating a few paintings myself. Jerry encouraged me, offering advice and corrective comments when appropriate. His invitation to my home was inevitable, and he brought a lot of light into what seemed to be a monochrome. Joanna simply found him amusing, but the kids, Val and Alex, most enjoyed the hilarity emanating from him. Neither Joanna nor I had the easy gift of interacting with young children that our artist friend had. So Uncle Jerry became our regular guest, which not only enlivened our lives, but also eased his poor lifestyle by providing food and drink that he could hardly afford on his own. He expressed his gratitude by entertaining the children, as noted above, and also painted portraits of us, including mine sitting at a desk, Joanna sitting in her favorite chair, and several of the four of us together in the lakeside park that became our favorite family vacation spot. Jerry was nearly 10 years younger and had no permanent life partner, though we rarely spoke on the subject. Despite his open, unrestrained nature in our company, I sensed that there was something of the loneliness in him that he carefully concealed. And since he had brought so much joy into our family life, I didn't want to spoil the relationship with my questioning. As far as Joanne and I were concerned, our married life continued as before. Now that we had children, our sex life was considerably regulated, although I think we were both satisfied with the quality and quantity of our lovemaking. When Jerry was with us, he brought joy to the whole family, especially Val and Alex, but still, he wasn't a regular visitor. Maybe once a week or so, usually on Saturday or Sunday. The kids were always thrilled with his visits, and even Joanna and I were thrilled with what he brought to our home. One day, I had to go into town to meet with a game developer who was my most regular client. The result of that meeting was a contract to work on their new game. When I returned, no one was in the house. Joanna was probably at the market. I was about to go to my office when I saw a note on the kitchen table. "Please pick up the kids from school. I'm out with Jerry." Her cell phone was next to the note. Thus, there was no way to track where she or they had gone. Not to mention there was no way to talk to her or otherwise contact her. Since we were together most of the time, I think this happened spontaneously. Naturally, I was furious. Not only did the betrayal hurt like hell, but it also put me in a difficult position. Instead of going straight to work on a new assignment, I was to pick up the kids and do all the housework Joanna had been doing. It took a few days to adjust to this new reality. My time to work on music was severely limited, and I knew I also needed to take some steps to protect myself and the kids. So one day, while they were in school, I went into town to meet with an attorney for advice on what to do next. As a result, since by necessity I now had to take over all the bill paying and check writing that my wife was doing, I closed all but one of the joint accounts for household expenses and moved all the funds into a business account. And that account was now part of a separate company held in my own trust fund for the kids, so neither my job nor the family savings, whatever they were, could be seriously compromised if Joanna filed for divorce in favor of marriage to Jerry. I considered undermining Jerry's reputation, but changed my mind as I decided it was best not to spread the word about what they had done. When my father-in-law called and invited us all over for dinner, I declined, citing that I was busy, and my wife, his daughter, was fighting the flu. However, from that invitation, I realized that Joanna wasn't socializing with anyone, or her parents would have been first on the list. So apparently no one but me, my lawyer, and the kids knew anything, and I left it at that. There was still the problem of my job. I used to be able to work practically all day and even into the night if necessary. Now I was limited to the time between taking the kids to school and picking them up. I made no excuses for the fact that I was slow at my new game, and it wasn't just the lack of time. Distraught that Joanna had destroyed our family, marriage, and vows, and that she had done it in collusion with a man I considered a friend, I found it hard to focus. After realizing my problems, one day while sitting at my desk, I began to reflect, looking out the window and analyzing possible measures to do more with less time. And that's when a breakthrough occurred in my mind. A breakthrough, yes. A shortcut, no. It was a realization, an idea of how to integrate the score with the actual flow of the game. In other words, to make the next musical phrase depend on which player's move is made, and so on with the phrase after, and so on and so forth. Genius. It's immodest to say, but it's true. Often great inventions, great inspiration, come to someone who finds themselves in the direst of situations. Somehow all my sadness, stress, lack of free time all combined to open me up to such a dazzling flash of insight. Of course, realizing this required even more effort than just putting notes on paper. I'd have to integrate with the game's software, which meant I'd have to learn more about programming than the little I'd encountered in college. But being a man on a mission, I gave up sleep to do online research. When I learned enough to move forward, I scheduled another meeting with the developer. It took some explaining, but once he understood what I wanted to do, he enthusiastically took it upon himself to connect me with software developers to facilitate the fusion of gameplay and music design. And it worked. And oddly enough, I found myself progressing much faster, encouraged by the novelty of what I was doing. Plus, my client promised that if it worked for a new game, they would pay me additional royalties for subsequent games. Another benefit of my discovery was that by becoming more satisfied with my work, I found myself becoming at least a slightly more fun parent to Valerie and Alexander. Yes, there was deep resentment in my heart. But I dealt with it the best way I could and moved on. Even sex wasn't a hopeless endeavor. I discovered the world of online video. Although fulfilling my needs through this portal was a less exciting process than sex with my wife. But at least, as that old song goes, you gotta love what you got. This happened a few months later, 4 or 5 if I remember correctly. I was working at my desk when I heard the front door open and close. It was Joan, and I took her in. I was able to utilize her childcare, cleaning, and cooking services. Accepting her return to marriage gave me more time to develop my talent. This compromise was clear to me then and remains clear to me still. Just a few days after my prodigal wife returned, we received news that Jerry Stone had committed suicide the day after she left him to return to me. Joanna was devastated. No doubt she was saddened by the loss of the man she loved. No doubt she was also tormented by guilt for being the probable cause. As for me, it was schadenfreude, in the highest degree. I prudently kept it to myself, however. My wife probably understood it. One might consider me petty about it. But having experienced what happened to me, who would feel differently? Besides, I am me. It's my nature. Life went on. I left the legal and financial changes in place, and Joanna now received an allowance for basic household expenses, like food and supplies, and nothing else. Everything else went into the business and was out of her control. I explained that this was due to tax considerations and didn't go into detail. She may or may not have liked it. I also got caught up in my newfound love of adult video for a couple months. Then I realized that having an available woman on call, I was foolish not to take advantage of her. So we resumed the relationship, doing more or less the same things we'd always done. But, at least on my end, it was just sex. I no longer felt emotionally connected to her. What she felt, I don't know, which probably wouldn't have been the case before her trip. So why did she come back to me? It's not like I could match Jerry in terms of entertainment. And I wasn't something new and different. Though after a few months of being with him, the novelty may have worn off. But to my calloused mind, thanks to what she did, it seems more likely that she wanted to return to an easier life than the one Jerry could provide. Perhaps she was also beginning to miss her children. Either way, even though the house she returned to was colder, it was still home. And family. I think she was better off with me than she was with Jerry. And I was better off with her than without her. The headaches started a little over a year after she came back. At first, we thought she was having migraines, but the treatment didn't help, and when they got worse and more frequent, we went to specialists. The diagnosis was bad and the prognosis grim. It was a neglected brain tumor with an almost inevitable fatal outcome. Putting aside my earlier resentments and putting aside my increasingly innovative work, I devoted my time and energy to caring for Joan and doing whatever was necessary for the children and the household. After all, I loved her before she ran away. She was still the only woman I had ever loved, so I had done everything I could to show her that love. Now, my mission was to comfort her and make her life easier if our prayers for a miracle went unanswered. God wasn't listening, was busy with something else, or just didn't have the power to intervene. Joanna passed away 6 months after the sad diagnosis. I tried my best to carry on, but the difficulties I faced now that she had left us were the same as when she left her family for Jerry. Perhaps it was superficial of me, but after Joan left, I needed, or wanted, to find another woman. My developer client, who had now become something of a business partner due to my ever-increasing share of profits from new games, introduced me to his cousin. Rita was much younger than me, very sweet and quite attractive. Why she chose to fall in love with me, a man much less attractive and much older than her, remains a mystery, but I am eternally grateful to her for it. Of course, this love had its own conditions. She wanted children of her own, and we had 3. But being the wonderful person she was, she treated my 2 children with Joanne as her own. They did not lack love from their stepmother, although I would prefer to think of her as their second mother. So despite everything that happened in my first marriage, I still thrived. My second marriage was a happy one, and my work life progressed well. While I may not be a rock or pop star, I have a solid reputation as an innovator in my field. And while we don't have houses all over the world or anything like that, we're financially secure enough that if I never start composing again, we don't lack for anything substantial. But I still think of Joan, and wonder if her decision to leave me for Jerry Stone was due to the illness that later took her away. More likely, it was just an ordinary betrayal, later rethought. But I wonder. And sometimes I also wonder about the artist. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.